Hi and welcome to the Ministry of Random Opinions. Today I want to talk about an observation that I've made. I've been reading a book. The book is called The Places in Between. It's by Rory Stewart. I haven't read it all yet. I'm on about page 250 out of about 320. It's a travel book, basically, written by Rory Stewart, who is the co-host of The Rest is Politics, the UK version, kind of the original version, I'm sure they would say. I find the guy incredibly insightful. He's an ex-Conservative minister in the UK. He's done lots of stuff. He worked for aid organisations, etc. And I think fundamental to this guy's principles is his experience when he was travelling. He's travelled through Iran, Pakistan, places like that. And he travelled through Afghanistan. And it struck me that we in the West, in the way that we look at some Islamic countries or predominantly Muslim countries, and especially in, desperately poor countries like Afghanistan, it's no wonder we can't communicate. And actually, it's easy to see why we go to war with each other, because of our difference of opinions and difference of viewpoints based on fundamental cultural differences driven by a lot of things. When I read this book, I was gobsmacked by the hardships experienced by citizens and people in Afghanistan. Rory talks about not just things like how a view of principles and cultures brought on by their belief in Islamic faith, but also just the desperate poverty and constant conflict that are experienced in those nations, and just the rawness of the environment that they are, being brought up in. The country itself, the landscape itself is incredibly hard. Afghanistan in of itself has been, invaded by various different other cultures, including Russia and ourselves and America, but also, internally the conflict from the kind of Taliban, from kind of feudal lords within, or kind of feudal leaders within Afghanistan, and various different factions within the country, various different subcultures within Afghanistan that are constantly in conflict with one another. And we're talking about conflict which might be between neighbouring villages that has lasted for years and years and years. This threat of conflict that constantly hangs over the country starts to make sense, or starts to make their reaction and their principles and the way that they operate make more sense. We project Western values into these countries, which quite frankly are alien to them, as their cultures are alien to us. I wanted to talk about it today because it's an observation that struck me, that we are not negotiating, or are we accommodating these countries, or understanding their principles and background and what has fundamentally been built into their culture because we don't experience what they've experienced. We're not experiencing constant conflict. I mean, 9/11 was the first attack on mainland US by a terrorist organization. In Afghanistan, they are being attacked constantly by various different protagonists, and they have a deep history of that. And when we talk about these people as a warlike, as, not accepting our culture, a level of deep distrust of people that don't look and talk and believe in the same things as they do, it's no bloody wonder they don't. I think if you, and any person who has gone through what they've gone through would understand why they're like that. It's just stark. I don't think in the West that we take enough notice of the building blocks of cultural differences in the way that this book highlights. I mean, get the book, read it. It's a great book anyway. It's a good travel book. But one man's journey across a hard and unforgiving landscape, a foreigner in a land where, conflict is rife. It can't have been the easiest trip, I've got to say. And a hat's off to him, for doing this. I do respect Rory Stewart anyway. I think he's a good guy. He's got a lot to say, and I agree with most of the points he makes. Not all, but most of the points he makes. So when we look at Gaza, when we look at even kind of the Ukraine-Russian conflict, I think we need to read more into the building blocks of their culture, the understanding of why they may be the way they are, and why they react the way they do, before we wade on in. The West has to start to understand that there are cultures outside of the capitalist construct that, we need to understand that. We need to know that human beings might have different experiences to us, have a different viewpoint of the world, born by just basics like the landscape they grow up in. And we just don't do that. But it struck me also in this book that as Rory was walking across this landscape, he was literally coming across villages. The initial contact with those villages was always tense, shaky. Here was a foreigner turning up at their doorstep, looking for somewhere to stay or food. So that initial contact was tense. But the fundamental principle of Islam is that a traveller should be offered shelter and sustenance as a given. Now, as he goes through Afghanistan, people will have a lesser or greater view of kind of what that hospitality means. But that's hospitality. I would ask anyone in the Western civilization and Western cultures, if someone turned up at your doorstep looking for shelter, that looked different to you, spoke differently to you, wore clothes differently to you, had different opinions to you, would you give them shelter, even in your garden shed? I doubt it. In fact, what I see is draconian right-wing immigration policies and mental principles being spouted by, almost fascist kind of edicts and beliefs. I think we've got lessons to learn from these war-torn, hardened countries that we're just not learning. I'm kind of embarrassed by it. People should change. And we need to understand that not everyone has to be the same for it to work, for us to work together and create a better humanity, and advance our species in a way that's not self-destructive. I'm going to start singing Kumbaya in a minute, but before I do that, I'm going to sign off. Listen, that's my opinion. Some may find it contentious. I hope not, actually. I hope I'm making sense. I mean, this is based on the writing of one man here. I have never been to Afghanistan. But I think we should start to be a little bit more knowledgeable and a little bit more aware of cultures that will enrich our own. And we shouldn't shy away from it. And we shouldn't fight it, right? We should allow it, not openly. You don't want to change the whole thing, but you do want to work in unison, dovetail together as cultures, and feed off each other's skills and kind of our principles, etc., to make ourselves better. That's my view. Like and subscribe. Stick your comments down below. I'd be really interested in them. Have a great day. Learn more. Don't stick your head in the sand. Find out about the cultures that some people seem to have a problem with. Find out about them first and understand where they've come from. I'm going to stop rattling on. Thanks very much.